I'm about to break your limit. Welcome to this edition of Break the Limit. I'm Chris-Salaam. I'm so excited that you're joining us today for this exciting episode. I'm talking about a very exciting personality today. Let's dive right into it after this introduction. Now, welcome back. Our scriptural foundation for today is Romans 8:20, verse 8, John chapter 8, verse 29. For whom he foreknown, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. That was a wonderful scripture. You're going to know why we quote it in a few minutes. Now, we have talked about Augustine, the philosopher, the theologian. We have examined Martin Luther, the spark of the Reformation. We have honored William Tyndale, the translator and the martyr. And today we are going to turn to a man who systemized it all. That man's name was John Calvin. It didn't start the Reformation, but he built the theological framework that will change Protestant doctrine for centuries. Some call him rigid, others call him revolutionary, but none can deny his impact. Calvin took the raw fire of reform and gave it structure, precision, sustainability. While Luther struck the match, Tyndale gave the people scripture in their own language, it was Calvin who laid out a comprehensive vision of the Christian life, rooted in the sovereignty of God and the authority of scripture. And the necessity of the discipline of disciple. His writing, particularly the Institute of the Christian Religion, became the bedrock of the Reformed and theology and the guide for pastors, scholars, and lay believers across Europe and around the world. Now, love him, hate him, or criticize him, Calvin's legacy is undeniable. He was the architect of a theological vision that still reverberates in pulpits, in seminaries, and nation through and through. Now, let's talk briefly about his early life. Calvin, or in French, Jean Calvin, was born on July 10, 1509, in Noyon, Picardy, France. His original name was Jean, J-E-H-N, Calvin, C-A-V-I-N. He was the second of 5 sons in a devoted Roman Catholic family. His father, Gerald, C-A-U-V-I-N, was a notary who worked for the church and intended for his son to become a priest. Calvin was a brilliant student. By the age of 14, he was sent to the University of Paris, where he trained in philosophy and Latin. Later, at his father's origin, he studied law at Orleans, Burgess. But somewhere along the line, God redirected Calvin's path. In the early 1530s, Calvin experienced a sudden, dramatic, personal conversion. He later called it sudden conversion to God. And he abandoned the church and began associating with reform-minded thinkers. In 1536, at just 26 years of age, he published his magnum opus, Institute of the Christian Religion, a groundbreaking theological treatise that laid the foundation for what we now call Calvinism. Now, so first of all, to understand who this man was, you must first of all understand what he teach, what his teachings were, or what his teachings are. What is Calvinism? Now, this is a concise summary, in other words, in few words. The versions of Protestantism influenced by John Calvin are often referred to as Reformed theology or the Reformed tradition. Calvinism shaped many global movements, including the Continental Reformed Church, number 1, in Switzerland and Germany, and in the Netherlands. Number 2, the Presbyterianism, led by a very famous Englishman, John Knox, in Scotland. Number three, congregationalism, bathing from the English Puritanism. Number four, the Reformed Anglicanism, particularly in the early 30s and the Ninth Articles. Number five, the Reformed Baptist, who adopted the Calvinist sociology but practiced believer baptism. Now, the core tenets of Calvinism have what I call 5 fingers: the total depravity, the unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, perseverance of the saints. It's called in short TULIP. Number one, total depravity. Humanity is spiritual, dead, and incapable of choosing God without divine intervention. Number one. Number two, unconditional election. God chooses whom he will save solely by his mercy, not based on foreseen action. Number three, limited atonement. Christ's death effectively saved the elect. That's number three. Number four of the Calvin, what I call the Calvin five fingers. Irresistible grace. When God called his elect to salvation, they inevitably respond. Number five, perseverance of the saints. Those truly saved will endure in faith until the end. Now, other distinctives with number one, sola scriptura, which we dealt with earlier. Scripture alone is the ultimate authority. Number two, the sovereignty of God. God is Lord over every detail of life. Number three, covenant theology. History is governed by God, but by God's covenant with his people. Number four, a regulative principle of worship. Only what scripture command is permissible in church services. While the time Calvinism is common, Calvin himself saw his work as part of a broader movement of biblical faith and spiritual renewal. Now, some famous preachers and churches influenced by Calvin. Number one, we mentioned him earlier. Number one, John Knox, founder of the Presbyterian Church in Scotland, studied under Calvin in Geneva. He was one of Calvin's students. Jonathan Edwards, America's foremost theologian during the first Great Awakening in the United States, and the man that I read the work extensively, Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preacher, a Calvinist Baptist. Martin Lloyd Jones, a 20th century Reformed preacher in England. Modern churches influenced by Calvin include the Presbyterian Church, the Dutch Reformed, the Reformed Baptist, and some expression of Anglicanism. Why is this man so important? Calvin's impact was not limited to the church. His idea about governance influenced modern democracy. His support of education led to widespread literacy, and his view of divine sovereignty still shape Christian theology today across the globe. His reach even touches science. Why is it important? Number one, he systemized Protestant doctrine. Calvin took the raw fire of Luther's protest and gave it form, gave it shape, gave it structure and theological coherence. Number two, revive biblical scholarship. Calvin commentary remain among the most respected in the history of the world. Number three, he emphasized God's sovereignty. Calvin redirect the church gaze from human effort to divine grace. He empowered a new model of church governance through the consistency of system of Geneva. He shaped what will be called today the Presbyterian polity. His influence enter nations, even influenced nations from Scotland to South Africa. Calvin vision helped shape Protestant civilization. Even in science, Calvin encouraged scientific inquiry as a way of glorifying God through understanding his creation. His affirmation of divine order laid the groundwork for the worldview in which science and faith could coexist, which was impossible before now. Number seven, he trained leaders, founders, founded schools and promoted literacy, critical to the decimation of both the Bible and scientific knowledge. Number 8 is doctrine of vocation, taught that all work, scientific, pastoral, or governmental, could be sacred if it's done to the glory of God. Now, for a scriptural reflection of this man called Calvin. Calvin was not just a theologian, far be it, far from that. It was more than that. He was a shepherd of soul. His theology was not dry. It was not dry doctrine. It was a vision of majestic sovereignty. God who alone saves. He believed every corner of life belongs to God, either all of God or none of Him. And that's what Christians should live by. Cora Dios, before the face of God. Now, for our key takeaway for today, key takeaway from the life of Calvin. Number 1, theology shaped culture. John Calvin's teaching were not confined to the pulpit. They penetrated every level of society. His theology transformed Geneva into a model of Reformed Christian living. So sorry today that they have turned their back against God. Under his influence, laws were written to reflect biblical ethics. Schools were established to teach both scripture and literacy, and civic leaders were encouraged to view their position as calling from God. Calvin believed that true doctrine produces a just society, showing that what the church teaches on Sunday affects how people live on Monday. It is true that when the church is failing, the world fails. Number 2, God's sovereignty is comforting, not cool. Calvin is often misunderstood by some naysayers as cold or fanaticism, especially due to the doctrine of predestination. But for Calvin, God's sovereignty was a source of deep assurance, knowing that salvation rests in God's unchangeable will, not in human effort or emotions. Bring peace to the soul. His doctrine wasn't meant to promote arrogance or fear. It was meant to eliminate anxiety. It teaches believers that their salvation is not fragile, but firmly anchored in the power and the purpose of God. Number 3, reformation requires structure. Calvin's life proves that revival cannot strive without reformation. He did not merely preach fiery sermon. He built institutions. He trained pastors, developed catechisms, and established churches, governments, and wrote extensive commentary to guide believers in sound doctrine. His work showed that sustaining a spiritual awakening requires more than emotion. It demands discipleship, biblical instructions, and accountability. In Calvin's model, spiritual renewal is organized, not chaotic. Number 4, you don't have to start the fire to keep it burning. That's what the life of Calvin teaches. Martin Luther may have sparked the Reformation that enveloped Europe, but John Calvin ensured it survived. Calvin came after Luther, yet his discipline and systematic approach helped cement the Reformation principle for future generations like myself and others. It did not invent the movement, but he gave it theological weight, institutional stability, and global reach. This teaches us that it is not always about being first. It's about being faithful in your generation, even if the fire began before you. Now, for our practical application for today, study scripture deeply. Calvin was a man of the word. Immerse yourself in it with the same seriousness. Number 1. Number 2, live for God's glory alone. In Calvin's word, our heart are idol factory. Our heart are idol factories. Make every part of your life a worship life. Number 3, build what lasts. Thing that gave us the Bible, Luther leads the march. but Calvin built the house. Let your work endure in truth. Number 5, don't just feel, think. Calvin teaches us to love God with our mind, not just our emotions. In closing, Calvin once said, we are not our own. We belong to God. Let us therefore live and die in Him. He lived His truth. He lived the truth. Through exile, sickness, opposition, and triumph, he died in 1564. But the Reformed tradition is systemized, lived on today, still calling churches back to Scripture, grace, and the glory of God. What a mountain of a man. God bless Calvin. See you on the next one. God bless you.